Just like we're all kind of adjusting right now. Shaky cam again. Alrighty, so hello. I'm going to do things a little bit differently, maybe. I'm going to try and start off with just a little bit of preamble, and then afterwards, then I'm going to launch into reading, and from there, I'm going to have a bit of time at the end in case to answer questions. I can try and answer partway through. Actually, it's a really bad time to try and do a chat tonight, only because I'm having technical issues. So I'm going to be reading. I can try and chat, but I'm not sure how it's gonna work because I'd be on my camera. So probably not. Yes, that. Any rate, for those of you tuning in, I am doing kind of like I'm doing live editing basically. I'm doing a rough read of a manuscript. I have no idea how it goes, so I don't know what's in the story entirely. My daughter knows, she's read it, but I have not. And I've got my two friends, for marking down, and occasionally this if it gets really, really bad, for having to mark. I'm going to be, basically editing and reading, and hopefully you enjoy. So without further ado, I'm going to launch in now. And we'll see what happens first. Whether I finish my reading or whether my computer finishes updating. Alrighty. So, Chapter 6. Dunthorne Pass and a Convergence of Forces. Thoughtful frowned at the riders coming up the trail. Too much hope that this will be Dalthorio and some friends. He understood that anyone who rode out of Aristos of Winsaskos wore a particular design on their clothes, saddlecloth, shields, and so on, which was fine, except his knowledge of Winsaskos was all third or fourth hand. He had no idea whose people wore what. While everyone knew Narnash's people wore the bear's head crowned. Of course, Narnash could tell one of his followers who wore, was that a chained unicorn? To do his work for him? Chained unicorns were all armed with bow, shield, and wore light corselets. Closer inspection revealed that the unicorn was actually breaking its chain, and the leader was smiling, which told him little more than he already knew. He'd been around on his own long enough to know that a person could smile while planning, or even doing extremely nasty things. Well, when he saw them, it had already been too late to hide in the brush. All that would do would be to arouse their suspicions. He put on a friendly smile himself. Good afternoon. None of you would happen to be Dalthorio Hanavoto, would you? No, but we'll take you to him. He's nearby. Warder's Garden Guide, no. About a week away. Buckle was wary, but tried to show no sign of it. Soldiers riding a week out of their way to get him to his destination? Not likely. No need to bother yourselves. Just point me in the right direction. No bother. The lady sent us to see you safe. The lady? Lasomni Haskavoto. She sent us to find you and to bring you in safely. The Talisman is to go to Lord Dalthorio, so we can escort you there. The casual tossing in a name, as though, of course, Thoughtful was aware of her, baffled the ox drover and made him even more wary. That's me, not the writing. Oh, and how did Lady Lusomi know how and where I was coming? Since I haven't spoken to a soul since I made the decision to come to Whence Ascos. The rider shrugged. I have no idea. Only that she knows, so she sent us. You're from Batangi, and you carry an ox goad, so I'd guess you'd be the one. There shouldn't be more than one baton ox driver coming over Dunthorne Pass. Thoughtful considered for a moment. If he ducked and ran, the riders would ride him down before he got 10 steps. If he acted willing until they took their eyes off him, I'll be glad to accompany you. I've had sufficient time in my own society the last few weeks. I could always say Carda Eshut Levagonli and see what happens. The commander looked at his troop. Moxitarum, you ride the lightest, take him with you. Thorum, Pangle, you ride point. We won't likely see any of Bloody Narnesh's men this far west, but keep your eyes open for anything unusual. Sir! Thuckle tried to convince himself that this might only be part of a complex ruse, aimed at allaying any suspicions he might have. This group felt too open, too friendly, but he'd heard too much of the nastiness that went on here in Whence Ascos. Best restrain his trust, at least for a little while. Hamildesh looked at the marble sphere. Yes, one side was pink. By his reckon, they were nearly dead east of the gap the Ascos called Dunthorne Pass. They'd been lucky, too. Traveling light, they'd had to live off the country. Only one town had been reluctant to supply them. Claimed poor crops and thin harvest. After Hamildesh's men fired a couple of hovels, the locals hurried to get the supplies ready. He put the marble away, then waved a hand to signal his men to move on. Destroyer's teeth! Lucy crumpled the message paper in her hand. She would have thrown it on the floor in disgust, but paper, even wadded paper, would not make a satisfactory sound on marble. Bloody Narnish has 300 horse riding through our territory. They've burned 3 houses in Disgargan and seem to be headed in the direction of Dunthorne Pass. El Coriat, Calcendor asked, how can you be sure where they're headed? At Disgargan, they could go in any direction. Maybe they're just looking for a sign of illicit army training. Well, we have an important person coming through Dunthorne Pass. Do we dare believe a force of Kingsmen just happened to be riding that way? Put like that, you're right. Do we send more people out to reinforce Teheran? She shook her head. Delthorio would burst into flames if he heard. I'll have to ride to him and ask him to lend us some men. With the best luck in the world, if he doesn't go into a fit anyway, by the time you convince him of the necessity, you'll have to ride like fiends to get to the pass in time. I know, but matters have turned in such a way that I've had to do too many things that upset Delthorio. We need him too badly for me to lose him altogether. It'd be nice if Delthorio showed some appreciation, Lucy reflected. This is definitely not what I came for. The small man stamped back and forth across the room. If you'd come to me first time around, I'd have made sure we'd sent enough people at the outset. As it is, we'll have to ride hard to get there. Yes, it'll be a near thing, she clamped her teeth around the next words she wanted to come out. So let's get moving instead of standing here blustering. Luckily, by this time, her host had begun to get down to the real business. He turned to his servant. Find Tortanio and tell him to get his red wyverns ready for a hard ride to Dunthorne Pass, then report to me. He turned back to Lucy. I'll have rooms prepared for you, lady, to stay until I get back. Destroyer's teeth not likely, I'll ride with you. Lady, this is no pleasure ride. We'll be moving fast, traveling light. Stragglers will be left behind. All good intentions of avoiding offense to Delthorio blew away like mist on the wind. Lord Delthorio, you and your men may ride as hard and fast as you wish. You'll not find me slowing you down. I will come. Delthorio naturally quailed at her anger. Of course, lady, just as you wish. I only wanted to spare you the... She raised her hand before you could talk about discomfort and conditions unfitting for a lady. She was just managing to rein in her temper, and such words, once spoken, would inflame her further. I appreciate your concern, noble Delthorio, but if I am to lead in this coming struggle, I must be willing to undergo less hardship than those who follow me. It was difficult, Thoughtful felt, to decide whether they watched over him as captain or guarded him as a guest. No one laid hands on him, no one drew a sword, no one showed any but friendly expressions. But someone was always nearby. Even when he went behind a bush to relieve himself, someone else was always felt the need as well. Even preempted him as well, when Moxitarum said, Destroyer's teeth, I have to go, come on, Thockle. You've been riding as long as I have. All that kept Thockle from seeing it as a companionable gesture was his fixed suspicion of everything in Wansaskos. They set guards around the camp at night, a natural precaution. Men in pairs by shifts watched around the border of the camp. Their obvious intent was to warn if danger approached, but it involved no extra effort to watch for anyone attempting to leave. Thockle slept as tranquilly as possible the first night. Despite his concerns and half-suspicions, Moxitarum lent him a saddle blanket that smelt strongly of horse. It was warm, though, and Thockle was used to sleeping in quarters that smelt strongly of ox. It was also much better than the shifts he'd been put to trying to stay warm higher in the mountains. Just let them get used to the notion he accepted them for what they claimed to be. Another difficulty about escaping, it occurred to him. He'd only had their word for the direction to take to get to Delthorio. They might be leading him straight to Bloody Narnish. He'd like to find someone local and ask a question or two. He was not likely to get an honest answer, not while accompanied by a band of armed men who need only lay hands pointedly on sword hilts to cause the average farmer to be struck dumb. At times he allowed himself a brief smile at the thought that perhaps these men, thinking how well they were lulling him into accepting them for what they had claimed. Just as he was trying to make them feel, he felt himself in the company of friends. On the second night, he slipped out of camp just before dawn, taking the saddle blanket with him. He was a little sorry about the saddle blanket. Moxitarum was a decent sort after all, and Thockle knew it was mostly his suspicions that pushed him to go on alone. He would have liked to stay nearby to hear the reactions when they saw he was gone. Someone saying, "Bloody Narnish will have our guts and garters over this," would justify his flight. Staying nearby meant they'd have a better chance of finding him again, so he didn't dare take the risk. He would also have to camp off the trail and watch out for them, both coming up behind him and waiting for him round some corner. In fact, they never seemed to search for him. They rode the trail as near as he could make out, less than half a day's travel ahead of him. They might be playing a deep kind of game with him, going ahead to make sure that anyone he talked to told the story they wanted told to him. Risky game for them, though. Only miss one person. and one person would come up through the woods after they passed, and the game would be revealed. It almost seemed they were escorting him, riding ahead to discover any trouble before it made itself known. He had no desire to go up to them and say, "Sorry, lads, I guess I was mistaken about you." Lucy tried to rub her behind clandestinely. Dalthorio had set a fierce pace the first day and a half, but her mount, Quandre, had been bred for stamina, not beauty. By the first day's end, they had left 3 of Dalthorio's men behind, and by the middle of the second, 5 more. With no desire to upset Dalthorio further, Lucy had affected not to notice these events. She made no comment whatsoever, knowing Dalthorio would hear even an intended compliment, such as, "Your men show up well," as being an unspoken, but they can't ride very fast. Wardesh Garden Guide. How could she take him on as a consort? He would want to wield power, and he would end up using his status to give poorly thought out orders, which she must then countermand and to avoid strife in the kingdom. She forced a smile. How many steps remained between this point and the crown? Each one a conceivable stumble, which would see them all dead, and here she was whining about a possible consort. Hameldash held up the glossy sphere, saw its bright pink forward side. "We're closing in, up this fork." The rattle and clatter of war gear followed as his company came up afternoon. Nope, that's a really awkward sentence. Followed as his company came up after him, winding along the road through the brush. And that's gonna get sentence redone. Again, like I said, editing as I go. Teheran and his men went carefully here. It was a brush country. The wooded hills, good ambush territory. Thornton came galloping back from Riding Point. He pulled his horse to a stop, and both he and Mount stood gasping for a moment. "Upward of 200 horse, bearing the crowned bear, heading this way, Captain Teheran." "Distance?" "Be all over us in half a day. We could scrag their scouts, gain a little time." "Might be worth it, Moxitorum. Hal Bennett. Go back and try and convince that ox driver we're friends. Knock him on the head if we have to?" Teheran paused, then shook his head. "The lady doesn't want him taking against us. Might be hard to convince him we're friends if we have to conk him on the head and tie him up. Get going. The rest of you, pick positions. We're going to pretend to be a massive army. I hope you've been doing your time at the archery butts. Horse holders rear. Be ready for us to fall back fast." He didn't bother telling the others they were in a pretty hopeless position. They had the sense to work that one out. Thakkel saw the 2 men riding hard in his direction and leaped off the trail, dodging through the bush to find a hiding place. The men didn't follow him. "Thakkel!" It was Moxitorum, but he didn't answer. "We know you don't trust us, no reason you should. You don't know us, only what we claim to be, but there's over 200 men wearing Blade Narnish's badge, headed this way. Swear and promise it's true." Thakkel thought that one over for a moment. Anyone could swear and promise anything. That didn't necessarily make it true. On the other hand, for several days they had just ridden ahead of him, trying not to make contact. Now there was a sudden urgency. It could be the real Dalthorio had sent riders, making it much more necessary for Teheran's men to get a hold of him. He sighed. "Mazaskos is turning into a distrustful old curmudgeon. You've got to believe someone, sometime." He stepped out carefully. "Hello again, Moxitorum. I apologize for the saddle blanket, but it's come in handy during the nights." "Chaos away with the blanket! Get up here and behind me. Captain, the rest are delaying Narnish's horde so we can get away. Let's not stand here nattering about blankets." Thackle took the young warrior's hand and swung up behind him. If they're coming up on the road, how do we get through? We'll slip through the brush. We'll need to dismount for that, but we'll ride when we can. The commander of Del Thorio's Red Wyverns dropped back to tell Del Thorio, "We're behind them, sir. Blaking a lot of horse tracks heading up the trail." "How old, Tortanio?" "A day or less." "Can we go faster?" "Yes, sir, but we want to watch that. Come up behind that bunch with our horses blown, we will be little or no use." "All right, push as hard as you think wise." He turned to Lucy. "Bad situation, lady. We may end up trying to take the ox driver, or at least a Talisman, away from Narnish's men." Lucy was wishing she'd had sent reinforcements to Heron before going to talk to Del Thorio. She could only nod. "Best moving then." Heron watched the Wentz come up the trail. There was room for two horses abreast here, and no commander worth his salt would leave his men strung out from hell to breakfast if he could help it. It would be nicer of the king to send something other than his own troops. An ambush would not panic this lot. Best he could hope for was a bit of confusion. He blew a short, sharp blast on his signal whistle, and was pleased to hear the sound of his men loosing on order. They sent out a second flight, and then Teheran shouted, "Charge!" Teheran shouted, "Charge!" followed by the whistle signal to withdraw. His men were well trained, and even in action would follow the signal whistle rather than the shouted order. Shouting war cries, his men loosed another flight of arrows. This ruse worked to the extent that the enemy spent a few seconds rallying themselves to meet a non-existent attack. Their commander then decided Teheran's people weren't attacking and ordered his own charge. Teheran knew he had one small advantage. This wasn't cavalry country. The Bear Crowns would have to get off their horses to come after him. On the other hand, with numbers available, it would be too easy for one flock of Bear Crowns to hold his smaller party at bay, while 3 or 4 dozen more came around his flanks and rear, which meant they had to pull back slow enough to draw the Bear Crowns after them, but not so slow as to let the enemy surround them. They weren't following. A small party were packing up the dead and their weapons, while the rest continued along the trail. Mother Goddess's belly! He blew the rally on me? What now? Well, good sense said trying to join Moxitorum and the others. That meant working their way through this brush in the general direction where he figured they might be. That gave the third of Ascos to choose from. Logic said the 3 would be working their way southeast toward the Lady's lands. So now, to take a good guess as to the best heading to pick. He rapidly outlined the situation for his men, then said, "Shrofton, you're from these parts. Any suggestions?" "Mother Goddess's belly, Captain. I'm 50 miles east of here. Most I know of these parts is the Oad story, or 2 I recall." "That's better than the rest of us. You got any notions? I won't hold you responsible if you lead us into a bog." "Well, there's luck, Captain. Few bogs in these parts. I'm mostly guessing, but I'd say this way." "Right, and all of you others keep your eyes skinned for tracks." Hameldash listened to the scout. "A lot of coming and going, sir, but 2 horses went off the trail here. One of them's heavy loaded, probably carrying double. Good work, man." He dug the marble sphere out of his belt pouch and held it up. It spun as the kinks in the chain unwound, but always the southeast face flared crimson. "Ha! Got you, bugger." Moxstrom frowned. "I'm no expert woodsman. I've got no idea how you go about hiding tracks, except maybe to wade into a stream for a bit. I think we'd we'd best just make for the lady's country. Who's this lady you keep talking about? You don't know about the lady? Are you sure you're the man she sent us to find? But no, you know about Del Thorio. You're bringing something for him. You must be the man. But you don't know the lady? Fierce flying pig guts. All I know is that an interfering starred wizard laid it on me to deliver his Morkan-eaten thing to Del Thorio Hanavoto. I know nothing of this lady. This lady is Lusomi Haskavoto, who will be our queen one day soon. And you'd best watch how you speak of her. We're all her men. Thakkel held up a hand. No offense intended, and none taken. Let's move along. Definitely 3 men, 2 horses. One of them has different shoes than they make in Oscos. And does he wear his hair long or short? The scout, a man with little humor, said, Can't say, sir. Tracks only tell so much. That was a joke, man. Are we catching them up or dropping behind? The scout shrugged. I can't say for sure, sir. I think we're at least keeping even. Right. Keep going. Report anything unusual. Hameldish didn't bother urging the man to go faster. This kind of country allowed for only so much speed when you tracked someone. It was a small spur off one of the mountains, though this far down, bare rock had given way to a steep stone-covered ridge, bearing thin grass and dappled with small, scrubby bushes. Question is, how far behind are they? How far are they behind us? And have they spread out at all? They've spread out, and we head along the base of the ridge, looking for an easier way over. We might run into them. And how far will we have to go to find a way over? Thakkel shrugged. Not my country. Mine either. I think we'd best go over. The hill was even steeper than it looked. Men and horses were breathing hard by the time they'd gotten halfway. As they neared the top, they heard a shout from behind, and looked back to see Tehoran and the others coming out of the trees and starting up the slope. Lucy noticed the direction of the trail they followed. She hoped Del Thorio didn't suddenly realize that Tehoran and his men were headed towards her lands. She frowned at herself. Best be concerned with catching up with the bear crowns before they catch Tehoran. She thought she heard shouts ahead. Should she bring that to Del Thorio's attention? Wardish garden guide. Where would this concern for his feelings take her? Tehoran stood, breathing hard. You shouldn't have waited for us, Maxitorum. They're there, and not far. Sorry, sir. We weren't waiting for you. Not at first, anyway. Horses needed a rest. I will admit, we waited a bit longer when we saw you. Well, move on now. We'll be up behind you in a bit. Yes, sir. They were just cresting the ridge when they heard shouting behind. A glance showed masses of men on foot swarming out of trees. They carried a different badge, and from this distance it looked like the bear's head crowned. They turned and went toiling over the ridge and came to a sudden stop. Fierce flying pig guts. The far side was even steeper, and over time, with the action of wind, the stream that followed the line of the ridge had fallen away. And the stream that had followed the line of the ridge had fallen away. 10 feet below them was a sheer drop of 30 feet into the boulder-pocked stream bed. The bare crowns spread out and moved up the slope, now some of them testing the wind and the range with arrows. Tehoran was also moving, but the situation was grim. Moxitarum spoke. We moved down along the ridge. Look for a place where we can get down easier. Tehoran and the rest were coming up now, and some of the bear crowns raced along the bottom of the slope. Eventually, as the ridge lowered, they would be close enough to pick off Tehoran's party without coming to grips. Tehoran finally caught up with them. When Tehoran finally caught up with them, he said, Mother God's toenails, Moxitarum. Mother God's toenails. Moxitorum should have gone the other way. Make it harder for them to catch us, not easier. Moxitorum looked back at the pursuit. Sorry, Captain. I was just looking at getting us over the ridge and away. Teharanari looked to Thoughtful. Do you think you can slip over the ridge and then move up the upslope while we keep their attention? Thoughtful hesitated. It felt like too much running away from a fight, leaving other people to die on his behalf. Teharan read his mind. Can't away with your pride, man. We're going to die. You die with us, it's for nothing. Thoughtful gave a quick glance over at the older warrior's face, nodded once, and went over the ridge as far as he dared, then began to move up along the ridge as fast as possible. Teharan made the best deployment he could with his men. They made ready to lose their arrows into the advancing crowd. They had one advantage. It was near impossible for a man to come all the way up the slope and be fit to swing a weapon at the end. The Bear Crowns would have to leapfrog their way up, at least half, giving Teharan and his men an opportunity to do a good deal of damage. On the other hand, while they were leapfrogging, some of them would be shooting too, and Teharan's men would start taking losses. They were kneeling forward on the slope so as not to present large targets, and no skyline silhouettes. And he had them holding their fire as long as possible. Other than that, there wasn't much else to do. Arrows came whipping up. Most missed, though Pangle gave a short gasp and fell sideways. Destroyer's teeth! He'd hoped to get in the first fight. His men were losing arrows even as he blew his whistle. Arrows continued to skip and scatter among the stones, though there were enough of the Bear Crowns to keep a continuous fire, while dividing his force wasn't worth the trouble. He saw they were having an effect on the enemy, however little. Well, could be worse ways to die. If that ox driver would just find a good hiding place, it might be worth it. Then, Wardash Garden Guide. The Bear Crowns are falling back. Destroyer's teeth! We aren't that tough a proposition. Then he took in the men deploying out of the woods. Red Wyverns! That's one of Delthoria's lot. Cavalry, too. Hard to tell numbers, with who knew how many still in the woods, but 50 or so could turn the trick if they knew what they were about. Now, it was no time for his men to slacken their fire. Anything that kept the Bear Crowns busy, hindering their rallying and reforming, would be useful. Steady now, lads. Careful. Aim. Pick your targets. Just like the butts. He thought he heard Moxitorum mutter something out of the lines of, but the butts don't shoot back. Another time, another circumstance, he would have vowed to keep that in mind for extra duty sometime. Here, however, he just smiled. Down below, the Bear Crowns were breaking up, right and left, rushing along the slope, looking for a safe place. If, as seemed likely, their horse holders had already been overrun, they'd have to try to make it all the way back across Saskos on foot. If Delthorio's men were at all on their toes, blessed few would make it. In the meantime, there were things to be done. Moxitorum, you look to be unhurt. You get the pleasure of chasing down Thoughtful and letting him know we're rescued. The rest of you, check the wounded. Pick up any good arrows to replace yours. Arrows gleaned off the battlefield wouldn't be as accurate as arrows they'd made and tested themselves, but better than nothing. And that was chapter 6. So I hope everyone enjoyed. I'm not really sure if I'm actually still playing, but because, well, I think I am now. But anyway, so I just finished up that chapter.